How often can diabetics eat beef or red meat as part of a healthy diet to prevent the worsening of blood sugars, the A1C, and to control other related complications? Is the saturated fats in beef your main concern? Or has modern science now conclusively shown which insulin-resistant foods are the true drivers of disease? What if eating the right cuts of meat on a daily basis could actually heal a diabetic body to the point of being medication-free? We will explore this, plus much, much more in today's groundbreaking episode. Before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. And if you have learned something new today, please smash that like button for me. As the world continues to explode in new diabetic cases, more and more people are taught by the quote-unquote experts not to eat red meat because they say it's bad for blood sugars. Well, here's the first problem. Did eating too much protein or beef cause your diabetes in the first place? Serious question. Red meat, along with other cuts of beef, are foods made up of fat and protein. Eating red meat in isolation will have little to no effect on your blood sugars. As far as diabetes go, you will be hard-pressed to find a category more controversial than eating red meat. Some enthusiasts, like your carnivores, swear by eating steak on a regular basis, while others on the other side of the spectrum, like your vegans, insist that it's downright terrible for you. There is no denying that red meat is an excellent source of high-quality protein, and it is chocked full of vitamins and minerals. But what if you're eating red meat every single day? What effects will it have on your body? Is there such a thing as too much? In full disclosure, I do eat red meat once a day, every day, 7 days a week, usually as part of my post-workout meal, and I've been doing so for over 30 years. But, as you will find out today, there are fundamental and biological rules one must follow when it comes to eating red meat in order to improve health. A simple Google search will state, beef, if eaten in large amounts over extended periods of time, a food high in saturated fats, may contribute to worsening symptoms of type 2 diabetes. Current dietary recommendations suggest limiting red meat to only 1 to 2 times per week. Many doctors and those in the nutritional sciences will quote study after study. And mind you, these are the worst of studies, observational studies, where they claim beef substantially increases the risk of insulin resistance, making your blood sugar levels rise to unhealthy levels over time. But what are some of the reasons for this disconnect? As a graduate of the Nutrition Dietetics University program, I, along with those who became practicing dietitians, were taught to first always pair your proteins and fats with quote-unquote healthy carbs, such as sweet potatoes or brown rice. We were brainwashed into believing the combination, that's the key, the combination of protein, fats, and good carbohydrates together stabilizes not only blood sugars, but allows one to boost their metabolism, therefore increasing energy levels. And it was also believed it reduces long-term health issues. But once one becomes a diabetic, whether one is a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic due to an autoimmune attack later in life, like myself, or one is an insulin-resistant type 2 diabetic, just a simple glucose meter proves that all to be dead wrong. That sweet potato, or even that slice of whole grain bread, will raise blood sugars just like any other soda, candy bar, bowl of rice, or even white bread would. Actually, it's worse because blood sugars would remain elevated for longer periods of time. In the episode, Top Protein Sources for Diabetics, which I will put in the description box below if you missed that important episode, we discussed the Women's Health Initiative Dietary Study, the most expensive nutritional study ever done at a cost of $625 million. It literally calls into question the biased agenda of the nutritional sciences. This study not only failed to prove their misguided view that is, the low-fat, high-carb diet is best for health, but the strongest predictor of future coronary heart disease in those postmenopausal women are all the classical clinical markers of insulin resistance, most especially type 2 diabetes, a 10.7-fold increased risk. In other words, as they dropped fats for more carbs, they became type 2 diabetics with metabolic syndrome. Cholesterol levels, which have always been the focus, were not a predictor at all. It is the blood sugars and hyperinsulinemia, or high circulating insulin levels, that is the true driver of disease and early death. I beg and implore you to watch the video done by Professor Tim Noakes. He explains the deceit, the fraud, the manipulation done to the study's data far better than I ever can. Once you see it, you will understand why you are basically on your own to critically think when it comes to taking nutritional advice. I'll put the link to his video in the description box below, or if you want to watch it right now, it'll be right up here. Besides manipulating data and using very poor observational studies, there are other devious ways of keeping the masses in line against animal proteins. Certain very well done clinical studies that prove the true cause of mortality stay unknown or remain hidden from the public. They get intentionally buried. You will never see or hear any of their evidence. For example, several years ago, Christopher Ramsden, a medical investigator at the Nutritional Institutes of Health, learned about a long, overlooked study buried deep in the dusty basement, never to be seen. Intrigued, he contacted the University of Minnesota in hopes of reviewing the unpublished data done by the late Dr. France. Dr. France was a prominent scientist studying the link between saturated fat and heart disease. One of his closest colleagues was Dr. Ancel Keys. And if you're an avid watcher of this channel, you've heard this name before. The very devious Dr. Keys was the main culprit who established saturated fats as public enemy number one. He even made the cover of Times Magazine in 1961. And this is where the control and the misdirection of data began to get the federal government from the early 1950s to recommend low-fat diets to the entire nation. The unknown research known as the Minnesota Coronary Experiment was a major controlled clinical trial conducted from 1968 to 1973. They studied the diets of more than 9,000 people at mental state hospitals and nursing homes. Due to modern standards and ethics, they probably could never do a study like this again. That is what makes this so unique. Because the Minnesota participants were in institutions that prepared all their meals and kept records, the scientists knew exactly what they ate for up to 56 months. They were able to tightly regulate the diets on these 9,423 participants aged 20 to 97. Half the subjects were fed meals rich in saturated fats from milk, cheese, and beef. The remaining group ate a diet void of any saturated fats. And most importantly, the saturated fats were replaced with vegetable oils. This study was intended to show that removing saturated fats from people's diets and replacing it with polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils would protect them from heart disease and lower their mortality. So, what were the results? Despite being one of the largest controlled clinical dietary trials ever of its kind, the data was never fully analyzed or released. And that is because the results were immediate and a big disappointment. Participants who ate a diet low in saturated fats and enriched with the vegetable oils, or should I say industrial seed oils, did reduce their cholesterol by an average of 14%, compared with a change of 1% in the control group. But the low saturated fat diet did not reduce mortality. In fact, the study found the greater the drop in cholesterol, the higher the risk of death during the trial. The findings ran counter to the conventional dietary recommendations, which still call for Americans to replace saturated fats with vegetable oils. By the way, there were other damning hidden studies also underway at that time showing it was the carbohydrates, refined carbs, and other sugars to be precise, that were causing hyperinsulinemia and high blood sugars that were the true drivers of mortality. And they knew it all the way back then. The sham, the con of the century, instead of focusing on clinical signs of insulin resistance, which start years before blood sugars begin to rise, today's experts still want to blame cholesterol and saturated fats. Second, as many of you already know as subscribers to this channel, omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory, are found in high levels in vegetable oils like your corn, your soybean, cottonseed, and sunflower oils. The inflammation outweighs the benefits of any cholesterol reduction. Our bodies need cholesterol to remain healthy. It's not your enemy. Now we have some background and the understandings of the bias within the nutritional sciences. Let me get into the reasons why I do eat beef once a day. First of all, beef keeps hunger at bay probably better than any other protein source. I get on with my busy day not thinking about my next meal or food for that matter. Second, red meat also has high quality protein. The complete amino acid profile it provides gets used for muscle building and the repair of all of my body tissues and organs. Third, it does not substantially raise blood sugars or cause inflammation. Finally, in addition to being packed with essential vitamins and minerals, red meat is also a phenomenal source of iron. And iron is understated in the importance to us diabetics, especially in my case, where I do train twice a day and I work a physical 7 days a week with no days off to rest within my own personal business. There is no time for feeling lethargic or tired. Iron plays that key role in energy metabolism. It is that critical component of hemoglobin, the main protein in charge of delivering oxygen to the body. Hemoglobin is found in red blood cells and facilitates the transfer of oxygen from the lungs to all of the body's tissues and cells. And just importantly, it removes all the carbon dioxide, the waste product, from the body too. And unknown to many, iron also acts as an antioxidant in the body. Iron supports the immune system as a component of proteins and enzymes that fight oxidative stress. I want you to remember this. There are two forms of iron available to us through diet: heme and non-heme iron. Heme iron is the most bioavailable form. Why? Because these foods contained hemoglobin originally, and because it's absorbed directly into our small intestine. Red meat and other animal products are the only foods with this superior version. Today, the World Health Organization estimates that 40% of all pregnant women on Earth are iron deficient and anemic, and so are 42% of children under the age of 5. That is what a diet based around cereals, grains, and refined carbohydrates will do, as they provide non-heme iron. In the episode, Why Carbohydrates and Fats Eaten Together Cause Insulin Resistance, which I will put in the description box below for you, I explained, as a result of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, the genes that we have today are hardwired. We as humans throughout our history have evolved to be protein-eating, highly active, fat-burning machines. We have never in our history as a species eaten carbohydrates and fat-based foods together, not only around the clock, where insulin remains elevated all day long because we've been instructed to snack. But to add insult to injury, we are now sedentary. We are no longer active. Second, when carbs and fats are eaten together, we not only get a mental high equivalent to taking drugs, where we now crave more and more carbohydrates, leaving us hungry, but insulin skyrockets to levels we as humans were never designed for. The body simply does not know what to do with two sources of dense energy coming in at the same time: fats and carbohydrates. Not only that, but this combination is almost never found in nature by our ancestors. Foods that naturally came from nature were either high in protein and they contain fats like meats, or they are carbohydrate-rich foods which are naturally low in fats. And this is critically important to understand. These carbohydrates, like fruits for example, were only eaten seasonally. It was given to us by nature to fatten us up for the harsh upcoming winter months. Milk was and is the exception to that rule. It's given to babies for one purpose: to quickly fatten and buffer that growing child. And here is why beef in particular is vilified, and rightfully so. When the general public eats beef, it's not only the fattier cuts, but here is the important point: it's always eaten with refined and or highly starchy carbohydrates all together. This is a disaster in the making. Think about the typical hamburger. It has the fattiest cuts of meat, which are cooked in more fats. Then you have the bun or the bread, a purely and highly refined carbohydrate, not including the condiments, also high in fats and more pure, straight, refined sugars. Always eaten with a side of fries, potatoes to be exact, a starchy, densely packed source of even more carbohydrates, which are then cooked in overused, highly oxidized vegetable oils, which cause even more inflammation. And this is the flaw of these observational studies against beef. They vilify meats in isolation, but they do not point out the true drivers of disease: the excessive refined carbohydrates and the oxidized polyunsaturated fats that come along in those that eat meat every single day. Never, and I'll repeat this, never cook any of your proteins in vegetable oils. Knowing all this, let me simply put this all together for you. If you are eating fatty cuts of beef, especially on a daily basis, carbohydrates need to be low. My daily source of beef is usually 80-20 lean ground beef that is boiled first, and the fat is actually drained. It is then cooked to well done. Salt and pepper are the only seasonings used. You will never see clinical trials where one is fed a lean source of meat along with above ground. Let me repeat that. Vegetables grown above ground, non-starchy vegetables as a base. And that is exactly what I do. They were always eaten together. Why? Because insulin requirements will remain low. And most importantly, the inflammatory markers, non-existent. The end result, vitality increases and the body remains incredibly healthy. For many struggling diabetics who have been awakened and adopt this reality of diet choices, the reversal of not only blood sugars begins, but so does the removal of many unnecessary medications too. Always remember our rule as resilient diabetics. Let thy food be your medicine. Good food is medicine. Bad food will need you to take more and more medicine. I bet many of you have more additional questions like, how much protein does a diabetic need per day? What are the best kinds of protein? I'll set up a playlist for you with the answer to all these great questions. I'll even expose more deceit and misunderstandings doctors and nutritionalists are taught to this very day about this vital macronutrient, protein. The first link you will see will be subscribed to this all-important life-changing channel. The second is the link to the playlist on protein. So, have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another episode, which are generally released bi-monthly. Bye for now.